Welcome to the Utah Assistive Technology Program's pilot training. We're really excited to have this pilot training to find out if this is something that we would like to do in the future to reach everyone throughout Utah. Today, Stan Clelland, our Assistive Technology Lab coordinator, will be talking about powered mobility maintenance. And we would just ask you to share any feedback you have at the end of the presentation in an evaluation sent out in an email. If you didn't receive the evaluation, I'd be happy to send that to you. And we would ask you to save your questions until the end, and Stan will answer them then. Thanks so much, and here's Stan.
How we'd like to try to approach this is we'd like to approach it from an IL coordinator's perspective. The AT coordinator, IL AT coordinator, as seen back in a mobility device, you want to evaluations on it and some basic, you loan it back out to another individual. We're going to approach this. You can all information with your people, the clients that you loan your equipment out to. If they keep it for longer than 30, probably need to do some of this maintenance. We're going to discuss scooters first, and we're going to cover the same ideas on both of them first. We're going to talk about tires and bearings, basic overall appearance, batteries and electronic components, actually disinfecting and so that they're to another person. Then we're going to talk about you actually test drive it before you. We're going to start with tires. Tires are real critical for the machine. If you see black starting to show up in any of your tires, especially the gray tires, that means that tire is well worn and it needs to be replaced. I would not loan out anything that has black showing on it. That's asking for some problems. You'll want to have good tread on the front. Look for wear patterns. If it's wearing on the outside, then the tire's not aligned properly. If it's wearing, sometimes they'll wear just in the middle, maybe they're overinflated. If it's an air tire, if it's a solid tire, that may not be the case. In the back treads, you should be able to put your finger down in between the treads. If you can't get your fingernail down in between the treads, there's probably not enough tread there to do justice, and they're going to have problems when they get into snow and different things like that. Maybe going up ramps, they'll have some problems. If it's a pneumatic tire, air tire, proper inflation it lets the tire wear longer and makes the scooter run better. Especially if they're a heavier person, you want to make sure that they're properly inflated. We'll move on to bearings. There's lots of bearings in the scooter. All the wheels have bearings. There's bearings underneath the steering components. You'll want to tip the scooter over. And you'll want to look at right in here in these bearings, and the bearings on the top of on the outside of the wheel and on the inside of the wheel. There's bearings on both of those places. You'll also want to look at on the four-wheel drive units or the four-wheeled units. There's also these steering arms, and they also need to be lubricated. I just take a can of WD-40 when I do this in the shop. I'll just take a can of WD-40, spray a little bit in on each one of the joints, any of the moving parts, and then move them so that the lubricant works into the bearing. You'll also want to make sure, take a screwdriver or a pick or something and clean out all the hair and dirt and debris. That's the biggest problem for breakdown on bearings is the hair and the dirt. Moisture's not good for them either, but that will evaporate out, but the dirt stays there. After you've lubed them and got them all cleaned up, the next thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about batteries and electronic components. To get to the scooter electronic components, you'll take the seat off, take the shroud off, and you're into all the electronic components. When you check a battery, you'll want to make sure that you disconnect the batteries from the controller. And you can take a electronic meter. I'm going to turn it to the voltage, and I will just test the voltage on to see what the voltage is. I have 12 on that battery, and I have 12 on that battery. So these batteries are fully charged. Knowing that they're fully charged, now I can do a load test on them. This is a load test meter. This tells you that when you put that person on it and they drive it for several minutes, if the batteries are going to hold up or not. You place that red on the positive, black on the negative. Push your test meter. And on the test meter, if it drops below the weak, there's bad and weak and good. If it drops below the weak, the battery needs to be replaced. If it's in the weak, it depends on how far. If it's really, that's a judgment call on your part. If it's just barely into the weak, then I would say it's probably good for a little while longer. So you want to test both batteries. You want to make sure that the connections on the batteries are good. The terminals are covered. If you don't have a terminal cover, then you want to get some tape and cover the terminal. So I would say those batteries are pretty good. The other thing while you're got the shroud off is you want to clean things up. Check the dates on the batteries, see how old they are, when they were installed. Look at your other electronic components, see how they're connected, make sure all the connections look good. You can look and see if there's anything that, and as you do this a lot, you will start to see things that they're all fairly similar, and so when things are out of place, you'll really spot it. So you clean it up, you look at the brake and the freewheel mechanism. That's another spot that could be lubricated. You'll want to look at the breaker. The breaker is a piece that looks like that, but all you ever really see is the end of it. And you want to look at that to make sure that that's connected properly. And that proper connection would just be proper wires plugged into the back side of it. If you push it and it pops back out, then it's probably bad, and it probably will need to be replaced. At this point, you can also lubricate your back tires at this time, now that you've got the shroud off. You'll want to look at the anti-tip wheels. This one actually has stuff worked up into some string wrapped around it. It needs to be removed. But the wheels should move, should rotate. They shouldn't be too loose. That wheel's probably too loose. It probably needs to be tightened up. So you get your wrenches and you tighten it up. As you look through these electronic components, you want to also look to make sure that all these connections are tight. If they're not tight, then they need to be taken apart and retightened. If they keep coming apart, you can duct tape them or electric tape them together. Look at your seat post. Make sure that the bolt or the pin that is in here isn't going to fall out. You'll want to lubricate this as well. Just spray a little WD-40 around the top here. That'll help the seat. When you put the seat back on, it'll help the seat to come off easier the next time. On the front part of the electronic controller, all you're really going to look at is to make sure that the tiller arms, control arms, that's tight fitting, and that when you turn it, it doesn't spin here in the yoke. If it does, there's an Allen screw there that needs to be tightened up. You want to plug the key back in and make sure you get a full reading on the voltage meter. That means everything is plugged back in properly. Unplug the key. Then you'll want to look at an overall picture. You want to start putting this back together. You want to look at the shroud. Is it broke, cracked, damaged in any way? If it is, it needs to be fixed at that time. A basic cleaner, Armor All, just a light coating. This will make these shrouds shine and they'll make them last longer. If the machine is really dirty, a steam cleaner would work really good, but not a power washer. It needs to be steam, and we actually have one in the lab. Once you've got that shroud cleaned up, you've got the seat post lubricated, you can put the seat back on. As you're putting the seat back together, check out the wear marks. This should be probably cleaned up and duct taped. If we don't duct tape it now, we're going to loan it out and it's going to get ripped up even worse. So we'll want to duct tape it before we Armor All. Once you get the seat repaired, you want to make sure that it's setting properly in the seat post, that it's tight, that it's not wobbling back and forth. Before you put the seat on, you also will want to make sure that all these bolts are in, that you have sufficient strength with the fastening brackets to the seat. Make sure that the bolts that hold the back on are sufficient, that the nuts are on the bolts. Armrests are level. They should be level and not sloping. There's adjustment screws inside the armrests if they need to be adjusted. On the back side of the chair, there's knobs. You can actually adjust the armrest in and out. The armrest should be outside the seat if it folds down, so that it can fold down. And when you check a chair out or a scooter out, you'll want to make note that it has armrests on the seat or that it doesn't have armrests on the seat. Whether it has a basket or whether it doesn't have a basket. Anything that can be added to or taken off of needs to be documented so that all the parts come back. Then looking at the overall appearance again, we're going to move towards the front of the machine, and it needs cleaned up. We've got some We've got some treads here that need to be glued down. We just get some contact cement and we'll glue those down. Then we'll armor all the rest of it, clean it up. We want it clean so that when it goes back out to the next person, that it's a representation of the IL center, that it's good. Or if it's just a client, it's important that that client maintain that piece of equipment. Some troubleshooting issues that we have are plugging the cord into the back of the scooter. They're kind of a rounded on one side of the plug, and you got to get that lined up just properly. Also, you got to make sure that that plug goes all the way into the receptacle, and that there isn't any gravel or anything in there. That's been a problem we've had with when they plug it in. They've traveled, and the gravel and dirt have flown into that, so we want to get rid of that. Once you see that there's no dirt in there, you'll plug it in. Make sure it's plugged in properly. Then you can plug that into the wall receptacle and see that it charges. If you look at the cord and it's cracked or it's damaged in any way, you can actually test it to see if it's good. You go to a voltage meter. You can actually put one of the testers in one side, and then when it turns on the horseshoe and it turns to 0, then that's a good circuit. Do the other side, that's a good circuit. Do the center, that's a good circuit. So I would call that cord good. If it's got a crack or something in it, maybe we could tape it with some electrical tape, get it up and so that it can be up and running. A lot of the scooters have permanent chargers, so that the cord's attached directly to the charger. It isn't a plug-in type, so if you have a permanent one, you want to make sure that that cord's taken care of very well, and that it's always best if it's unplugged when they're traveling. Unplugged and either put in the basket or put in the pocket behind the seat. That's always a good thing. Now that you've kind of got your scooter up and running, it looks good. It's important that we disinfect it. I use a Lysol disinfectant in the lab. If they're really dirty, I steam clean them first and then I disinfect them. But you want to pay particular attention to the tiller and the hand grips, the throttle controllers, and the armrests and the seat. You want to clean those up really well, spray them down good so that we're not spreading any germs from client to client. Last, you're going to take the scooter for a test drive. And the things you're looking for when you're driving it is, as you adjust the dial of speed, the Turtle Rabbit controller, you'll want to see that the scooter responds, goes faster and slower. You'll want to pay attention to the voltage meter. Is it going up and down as you change that? Those are signs that there's other issues going on in the controller that need to be addressed. You're also going to, as you're driving it on hopefully a flat surface, a nice sidewalk or something, you're going to see if it tracks. Does it pull to the left? Does it pull to the right? If that's the case, for a four-wheel drive one, you might need to align the front wheels. And you'll need to talk to a service technician who actually sold you the scooter to get all the details on that. You could also probably call me at the lab and I could walk you through it. If it's a single, if it's a tricycle type, it doesn't have near as many bearings and stuff in there, but it can still wander one way or the other because of the back wheels. Maybe they're different size or whatever. You want to make sure that they're all, try to make sure that they're all the same size, same tread pattern, same tread wear. That kind of covers the scooters. We'll move in, I'll move this back and we'll move into talking about the wheelchairs now. On the wheelchairs, there are so many different types out there. I'm going to be just as general as I can be with them. There's so many seat configurations and so many controller configurations. I'm going to try to be as general as possible with it so that you can take it and use common sense to handle the issues. Again, we're going to start with the tires. You want to make sure that the tires are all about the same type of tire, that their tread patterns are the same. Look to see what the wear pattern is on them. In the back tire, on this back caster, you're going to make sure that that is a good tread, and you'll take the yoke here and you'll try to wiggle it side to side and see if this bearing is loose. If that gets really loose when that person drives, you get this wobbling motion, and that's a bad thing. So you want to make sure that that yoke is tight. You want to take that wheel and try to move it side to side in the yoke and make sure that these bearings are good and that this bolt is tight. You'll move it in lots of different directions to make sure that it's snug, that it's tight. That's been the biggest thing I have seen when it comes to breakdowns on and scooters not traveling properly. On this front wheel, proper adjustment is about the depth of your finger, or about an inch. You want that about an inch off the floor. That's just a forward anti-tip wheel, and only an inch is about all we want there. Again, you'll want to look at inflation. If there's a valve stem on it, it's got to be properly inflated. If there's no valve stem, then it's a solid tire, and there's nothing you can do about that. Bearings. Bearings on these are, they go bad fairly quickly because they get wrapped up in thread and hair, and those kind of things get wrapped up in it. They're exposed to the moisture, so we want to make sure that they're free moving. As you check them and clean them out, you can lubricate them with the WD-40, spray it in on each side, move them a little bit, make sure that they work good. The drive wheel, whether it be a front wheel drive or a rear wheel drive or a mid wheel drive, the drive wheel, there isn't any bearings or anything we really lubricate there. So we move right on to the back wheel, lubricate both these bearings, make sure that they're moving good. You can take the cap off, lubricate this bearing in here, put a little lubricant in the top of the yoke. You want all that moving. A lot of the bearings are kind of sealed bearings, but the lubricant does help. You want to make sure that they're clean, that they're dry. That kind of covers the wheels and the bearings on that. And again, you've got both sides, so you'll be dealing with both sides. Then you want to look at the general appearance of the chair. Is the footrest straight? Is it crooked? Is it loose? It should fold up. if parts of it start to come apart, that needs to probably be fixed. Contact cement or replace the bolts here. There's a little bit of play in it, but that's the way it comes from the factory. You'll want to kick it into freewheel. Make sure that it still freewheels. As you look at the overall appearance again, you look at the seat. This armrest has been taped up. You want to make sure that that tape is still good. You want to make sure that it's square to the seat. You can do adjustments on the armrest with right here. Again, you want to adjust the armrest so that it barely clears the seat because the seat folds forward. Make sure that those are tight. As you're checking out the armrest, you want to make sure that this cable is loose enough so that when it folds up, that it doesn't disconnect from back here. This is the controller cable. You can use cable ties or electric tape, but it needs to be tied down. So that it doesn't catch on things when people are traveling. Make sure that the bolts and the connections for the back of the seat are solid. Before you take the seat off, you want to disconnect the electronics. Take the seat off. Look at the shroud. You're looking for cracks or breaks. Don't see any. So that's probably a good thing. Again, at that time you could clean it up with Armor All or some kind of cleaner. We'll move into the electronic portion now. Look at the batteries. You want to disconnect the batteries. You want to make sure that they're cleaned up and that there's not excessive dirt on here. Look at the dates on them, when they were installed. Take your voltage meter again to voltage. Check to see what you got for a voltage on them. They should be fully charged. Before you do a load test, the battery needs to be fully charged. Then we do a load test on each battery. And these dropped over into the bad category, so these probably need to be replaced. And if you replace one, you got to replace them both. So I would replace these two batteries on this wheelchair before I loaned it back out. Otherwise, you might get called out on a call to come rescue this person. Then you'll want to reconnect everything back up. Make sure all your connections are solid. Look over your components, see anything that looks bad. You want to make sure that all the connections are tight. And connected. See, here's one that wasn't connected. At this time, while you got the shroud off, you could check these fuses. You want to look to see if any of them are getting black. If they're starting to get black, they probably need to be replaced. You can actually look at the place where you plug in the charger at this time to make sure that that's all cleaned out. You can get your vacuum, put your nozzle on it, get into all these little tight spots, vacuum that all out, clean all that out. Then you'd wipe it down, get it all cleaned up. The more maintenance you can do on them, the longer these machines are going to last. So you've gone through and you've looked at all these components. Everything looks good. All the connections are good. While you've got it apart here, you can actually roll it back and forth. Make sure that everything looks good. There's no debris caught down in the drive wheels. Then at this point, I'll put it back together. Again, I've already looked over all the hardware. Then I'll reconnect the controller. Turn it on, make sure that it still works. Make sure that the brake lockout isn't on. Make sure that it still drives. Then I would take it for then I would disinfect it, spray it down with Lysol, clean it up however I needed to clean it up. Then I would take it for a test drive. A lot of the controllers they're programmable, and so you can gear the speed up or the speed down depending on who you're loaning it to. A lot of those things, you've got to have the controller to be able to change all the memory in here, and we have a controller. We could probably help you out with that. But that you want to, when you test drive it, you want to make sure that it tracks properly. It doesn't pull left or right. You'll want to see the response of the joystick. If it turns left, turns right quickly. Sometimes it'll turn left faster, then it'll turn right, so on and so forth. Reverse in the scooter, as in the wheelchair, will be half the speed of forward. So whatever you go forward, you're going to go half that speed in reverse. Once you've test driven it, you want to check also on the wheelchairs, the power wheelchairs. A lot of them have seat controllers. Maybe the back will go back, or maybe it'll raise the whole seat, or maybe they've got modified leg rests that come out with actuators. You want to make sure that all that is working, all those parts are working, and that they're working efficiently, that they've been cleaned and lubricated. That's a real brief overview of the maintenance on the wheelchairs and scooters. We'll take questions at this time if you have any questions.